Indiana Jones and the Great Circle originally came out in December 2024 for the Xbox and PC platforms and is currently gearing up for a release on PlayStation 5. This felt like a good time for me to review this game as I missed playing it during its initial launch window.
This is it.
Since this is one of
This is
my
where Forrest
longer
Gump comes in.
reviews, I will keep the introduction short and
It
skip
was good.
straight to the summary for those
It
of
was
you who
very, very
won't
good.
watch the full video. The summary is that this game is really good as long as you keep your expectations in check regarding the action part of this action adventure game. For the most part, it is more of an adventure game than an action one, but even during the most intense action sequences, there is less of combat and more of the cinematic action that we have come to expect from franchises like Tomb Raider and Uncharted, which ironically were directly or otherwise inspired from the Indiana Jones film franchise. The game is visually stunning, features excellent voice acting, all of which back up a well written story that keeps you interested throughout its modest runtime of 12 to 15 hours. However, that's only if you stick to the main story. For those who like exploring everything the game has to offer, I've seen people report playtimes of 40 hours or more. For PS5 players wondering if they should get this game on day one, it definitely matches the high standards set by some of PlayStation's best single player franchises like God of War, Spider Man, or The Last of Us. The start can be a bit slow in terms of gameplay, as there's more puzzles than action, but the pace picks up gradually in the second half, and it's an amazing ride all the way till the end. As you can tell, I had a great time with this game, and that's more or less the tone the rest of this review will have. There will be a few spoilers ahead.
We are walking the path of death. What of the curse? Superstition, Satibo. Tranquilo.
The first Indiana Jones movie came out more than 40 years ago in June 1981 and is considered to be among the most successful movies of all time. Meanwhile, the most recent movie came out in 2023 and was widely considered a box office flop. So it's fair to say that the Indiana Jones franchise doesn't have nearly as much of a cultural pull over the modern audience as other older media franchises like Star Wars or James Bond. The main concern, of course, is that all the actors who made the original films a hit are now very old, and it is unlikely for audiences to accept younger replacements with the same readiness that they do for a new James Bond movie. With the Great Circle, the franchise gets an opportunity to solve this issue with a different medium. The game uses the likeness of a young Harrison Ford exactly as he appears in the 1981 film. This lets the story stop trying to make the main character older just to keep up with the lead actor's real age. The game is set in 1937, just 1 year after the events of the first film. You don't have to know anything about the films to enjoy the game, although the experience will obviously feel a bit different. Indiana Jones, or Indy for short, is a world renowned archaeologist who also maintains a relatively boring academic job when he is not setting out on adventures. One night, as he is asleep at his desk at work, he is woken up by a disturbance, which turns out to be a giant of a man who wants to steal an ancient relic from the college museum's collection. Indy tries to fight the giant but is knocked out cold. The next day, he realizes that the giant has stolen a cat mummy and has left behind his pendant by accident. Puzzled about his choice for this specific relic, Indy decides to investigate the case and prepares to travel to the Vatican City based on a clue found on the medallion. From here, the story takes us on a globe-trotting adventure as Indy tries to stop Hitler's forces from taking control of ancient relics of power collected from various historical sites, all of which collectively form a great circle. It's better if I let Indy explain this part directly.
That's the Earth. Throughout history, mankind has built sites of great spiritual significance. Siwa, Giza, Persepolis, Mohenjo-Daro, Sukhothai, Nazca, Machu Picchu. Now, here's the strange part. If you were to draw a line through these ancient sites around the globe, you get a perfectly aligned circle.
The Great Circle.
Exactly.
Sounds like
So, the Great Circle itself is not some ancient relic, but it's a shape that connects more than a dozen ancient relics spread across the globe. Now, because it's not practical to make a 100-hour game with these production values, we are not asked to hunt down every single relic. The villain has conveniently gathered most of them, and the player only has to hunt down 4 of these relics. Speaking of the villain, his name is Emmerich Voss, and you can tell he's a good villain because you immediately feel like wanting to punch him in the face, and that's before he even opens his mouth. Voss isn't just a regular bad guy, he's also an archaeologist just like Indy, except that he works for Hitler. There are 2 other important characters in the story. The first is Locus, the giant whom we fight in the first chapter. I won't spoil why he is important to the story, but there's more to his character than we are initially told. The second is Gina Lombardi, an Italian journalist who runs into Indy while investigating the Vatican for her own mission, which is to find her missing sister. Indy and Gina agree to work and travel together once they realize that they are chasing the same person, Voss, for their own reasons.
she's my sister.
After the Vatican, the story takes us to Egypt, the Himalayas, China, Thailand, and finally Iraq. Each of the locations has different side quests and secrets to discover, which offer more snippets of the story. But for this review, I largely ignored all of the side content and was still presented with a complete story. There's just one minor detail that I didn't like about the story. It repeatedly shows Indy destroying ancient relics to remove the smaller relics hidden inside them. While this might seem necessary to move the plot forward, it goes against the character of Indiana Jones himself. In the first film, he allows himself to be captured rather than blow up an ancient artifact. So it's a bit strange to believe that the same person would willingly destroy multiple artifacts. Anyway, that was just one weird thing in an otherwise well told story. Backed up by some impressive visuals and strong voice acting, the story succeeds at convincing you that you're playing an interactive version of an Indiana Jones movie. There are plenty of highs and lows in terms of action sequences and heartfelt emotional moments, and a few attempts at humor. I know there's a large section of the gaming audience that prioritizes gameplay over the story, but this is one of those few games where I would say the story is the key selling point, and it keeps you engaged till the very end. There's a DLC planned at some point in the future, and I'm personally quite excited to see what this version of Indie has to offer next.
Non-routine, sister.
I was actually just bird watching.
Hell of a bird. Give me that.
If the story is the best thing about the game, the visuals are a close second. Usually, I stop noticing a game's visuals after the first few hours because by then either the story or gameplay becomes the focus. But this game's international setting meant that every level presented something new in terms of visuals, and I couldn't help but stop for a minute and simply look around each level. Except for the level set in Shanghai, which was pretty much non-stop action. All other levels offer enough time for the player to slow down and take a look around. You are still heavily restricted as to where you can actually go, but within the limited sandbox, you are free to roam around and admire the surroundings. No matter how you choose to play the game, you will be presented with some stunning visuals. The opening scene is essentially a 4K remake of the opening scene from the 1981 film Raiders of the Lost Ark. There are a few minor changes to add in some gameplay elements, but otherwise, it's a perfect remake that allows you to explore it at your own pace before moving on to the next cinematic moment. Apart from the high quality assets and textures which give the game a premium feel, there's more to the visual style. A lot of the elements are borrowed from the films, including the font style used and the transitions between various countries on the world map. These little details won't matter much to those who have never watched the films, but they will certainly be appreciated by those who have. Moving on to the performance, seeing that I played this game nearly 4 months after its original launch, the performance is quite smooth with no bugs in sight. On Series X, the game maintained a smooth 60 frames per second throughout.
You have no history, no nation, no leader. What you have is your stupid American cartoons. Choo choo, choo choo. Ha 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 ha.
What's this?
The gameplay contains an odd mix of action set pieces, puzzle solving, and taking a lot of photographs. I know that at the end of the day, this is a video game and is not meant to be fully realistic, but Indie must have found a really generous sponsor to be able to take unlimited photographs in 1936. I mean, the game tries to be realistic when dealing with firearms, where you get severely limited ammo, but with your camera, you practically have unlimited shots. And that's actually where we start the game, with the camera. The Raiders of the Lost Ark inspired opening scene was just a trick to hide the fact that the real opening part of the game is quite slow. The story is still intriguing, but it takes its own sweet time to set things up. It isn't helped by the fact that the first location is the Vatican City, which looks nice with its impressive buildings, but it isn't exactly reputed to be an exciting place to walk around. The first level introduces you to the various gameplay elements, like using your whip to climb up great heights, using your whip to jump across gaps, using your whip during puzzle solving,
Get that gate open for you.
using your whip to disarm enemies, and so on. But seriously, the implementation of the whip is done quite well, and you never really feel the need for another tool. Puzzle solving forms a crucial part of the gameplay. The puzzles are not so difficult that you immediately feel the need to refer to an online guide, but they are also not so easy that you immediately just know what to do. Getting that balance right is quite difficult, and this game manages to pull it off most of the time. Getting that sense of achievement after solving a difficult puzzle always feels good, and the game gives you that feeling several times. That said, some of the puzzles did feel a little unbelievable, as in a bit too unrealistic. I had to keep reminding myself that this was a video game and not think too much about how a certain puzzle would have actually worked 1,000 years ago with so many mechanical parts. While the puzzles are spread across all chapters, the second half of the game focuses more on the action before suddenly reintroducing puzzles towards the end, which slows down the pace rapidly. Put together, I think the balance between action and puzzles was good, but the pacing did feel a bit inconsistent. Moving on to action, Indy doesn't back away from a fight, but isn't too fond of using firearms. The game itself tries its very best to keep your ammo reserves limited so that you don't speed through an entire level in seconds by shooting everyone. There are plenty of enemies all around you, but your guns have limited ammo and your melee weapons are breakable. There are repair kits available and you can search for ammo, but the game seems to be designed to encourage stealth and avoiding fights where you can. There are very few instances where the game actively puts you into a situation where you need to fight, and there are a few instances where the game puts you behind a gun, and you still have limited ammo in those situations. The whip is good at disarming enemies and distracting them, but it isn't really an effective weapon on its own. So, for the most part, you have to get good at hand to hand combat, knowing when to parry and when to dodge. Apart from the combat, the action also involves elaborate set pieces, which made the Uncharted series famous 2 console generations ago. This game executes those sequences very well, but if you are a seasoned gamer, you do get the feeling of having seen something similar before. The main story missions are broken down into pretty long chapters, except the one set in Shanghai. Apart from the main story, you can choose to spend more time in each location, exploring secrets and finishing side quests. To sum up the gameplay experience, it does a fine job in combining platforming, melee combat, puzzle solving, exploration, and action set pieces to support a strong story which collectively delivers a game that is simply quite fun to play, provided you sit through the slow opening sections.
I've got you.
Good reflexes.
You're wondering if maybe you should have built yourself a life of meaning instead of ending up here, dead and forgotten in the sense of Africa.
When the game opened with a scene inspired from the first movie, I was a bit worried that we would be treated to several scenes with the iconic Raiders March theme music playing in the background. Thankfully, the theme is used in moderation, making its usage more impactful. However, this means that the actual soundtrack used in the game can feel a bit generic, and players may unfairly try to compare it with the lofty standards of the John Williams theme. This is one of those games where the music is quite good, but it disappears into the background as the player is being treated to a visual spectacle on screen. The music definitely enhanced the cinematic set pieces and made them more enjoyable, but after beating the game, I couldn't remember any particular piece of music. That's probably a harsh thing to say, but that was just one guy's experience. The voice acting in the game has been praised a lot, and for good reason. Troy Baker as Indiana Jones knocks it out of the park, and there's no surprise there. But I want to give special mention to Marios Gavrilis, who plays the villain Voss. He immediately makes the character memorable and, of course, punchable.
Um ihren peinlichen Versuch, Dominanz zu zeigen, zu unterstreichen.
The sound design is pretty decent as well, and at the center of it all sits the whip. The cracking sound it makes is quite accurate, and it is always funny to see an enemy lose their weapon to something as seemingly simple as a whip. I missed playing this game at launch, partly because I wasn't too interested in the franchise to begin with. However, the first thing I did after finishing the game was to start watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. If TV shows and movies based on video games are being made to increase awareness of the game franchises, The Great Circle proves that it can work the other way around as well. The Indiana Jones movie franchise is essentially on hiatus until they recast the lead role. Until then, if this video game gets a sequel, it can certainly bring a whole new audience to this decades old franchise and maybe even increase the demand for new movies. For players on PS5, this is a must buy for sure, especially seeing how Sony themselves have not released a huge cinematic adventure in quite some time now. For players on Xbox and PC, there's always the option of playing this title with Game Pass. Even otherwise, this is an easy recommendation for anyone who enjoys going on a well produced virtual adventure. Thanks for watching.
Don't you want to know what this is all about?
You're damn right I do.